Hi, welcome back to Astro Action, Astrology for Proactive Spirits. In this video, I'm going to explore a bit about Elon Musk and the astrology of Generation X. Of course, Elon Musk is more than in the news these days. It is April 1st, 2025. He practically is the news. I'm going to encapsulate uh, some ideas that I wanted to put forth in a much earlier video just about the election on November 6th, 2024, about that chart. And it's interesting to see how those indications from that chart are heavily being played out right now, many months later, as the Trump administration has gotten off the ground. Um, like I said, this is April 1st. So, first of all, a little bit about Generation X. If you recall, and if you haven't seen my video about Pluto in Aquarius, it is also subtitled Why Gen X Will Rule. Okay, Pluto in Aquarius will be in Aquarius for about the next 20 years. In that video, I pointed out that there is a resonance between what we call Generation X and the energy of Pluto in Aquarius, because Pluto, being in the sign of Aquarius, is activating Uranus. Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. So there's this blending of the Plutonian and Uranian, right, through Pluto Aquarius. But this type of energy was last seen in the kind of through the mid 1960s when Uranus conjoined Pluto, the same archetypal union in a sense. I described it as a liberation of our transformation, an emancipation of our deepest human potentials, okay? And how that, anybody kind of acquainted with a decent bit of modern history knows that the events of the 1960s are still echoing and resonating to this day because of the powerful transformative energy. One great astrologer, Alan Okun, very succinctly describes that aspect, which is present in the charts of all Generation X people, right? Because they're the generation born after the baby boomers, a smaller demographic, born through the mid 1960s. So they have this signature of this energy, in their uh, group consciousness and in their personal individual consciousness somewhere. Some people it's more activated, it's more part of their lives than others, right? There's some people that are kind of a representative of their generation, right? More so than others, but and that has to do with how it aligns in their chart, right? It might be more predominant in their chart, this intense Pluto Uranus conjunction, right? um so that energy, Alan Okun, the great astrologer, had described it succinctly as a tremendous elevation in consciousness. You can see the glyphs that I have pointed out here in the video in the lower part of the screen. Pluto, Uranus in Virgo. Okay, that was in the mid 1960s. Um, I'm not going to go too in depth into the whole subject of Generation X because there's just many layers to it. But anyone acquainted with astrology knows that the combination of sudden shock and sudden awakening of Uranus with the deep, passionate desiring for transformation that just it tends to explode from the depths. That combination is explosive, is radical. It just sort of levels the landscape that we're in, and has a deep connections to technology. Now, at this time, through the 60s, we were entering the Cold War, where the threat of nuclear annihilation of the entire planet was looming over all of us. Okay, so we have the high technology of science combined with the ominous threat of what Joseph Campbell calls Lord Death, right? Pluto, Lord of the underworld. This is also happening in this highly mental, analytical sign of Virgo. Okay, kind of adds more a technical facility to it, right? Now, this generation was going to be, as their potential unfolded, they were going to be the people that helped launch a lot of technology, right, into the world. Now, um, for example, of course, everything to do with the internet. Um, Now we have somebody like Steve Jobs, who's a little bit earlier. He's a bit of a baby boomer. Let's take even RFK Jr. because I'm going to be talking about him a little bit. They were like late baby boomers, but imagine they're like 10 years old, and this alignment happens in the mid 1960s. Like they're roughly 10 years old, and how that imprinted their psyche because it was this powerful event, resonating through the collective consciousness and seen in so many social transformations. Um, so they're growing up. This is a huge impact on their consciousness, and uh, in the case of Steve Jobs, he finds himself to be this revolutionary leader in terms of transforming technology for the people, for the masses, with this Apple computer. Uranus is very much connected to doing things for the masses, right? It's sort of like the mental mind of our society. It's very accents a lot of humanitarian values, right? And he really kind of transformed that theme and put the power in the people. That's very like Pluto, right? Power with the people, Uranus, uh, through his Apple computer. That was his desire. Again, it required this high intellectual analytical ability connected to Virgo, right? So Virgo just kind of adds even more of a laser-like quality to it. Okay, to these Gen X people. Now, uh, some other ways that it shows up as far as this intensity of Gen X. Later through the '90s, we had like this sort of like the words of like extreme, culture, and uh, there was a lot of sort of ramping up of the intensity in the various arts and music. Let's say we had like we had punk rock, we had, which is a very radical, intense underground scene that a lot of people, younger people, aren't very knowledgeable about, but really on the edge of total anarchy. You have heavy metal and all forms of like heavy dark music, which had a lot of uh, technically advanced like musicianship, right? A lot of intensity like within the arts and the music and the whole culture, and sort of a lot of the sort of darker ideas, and that comes from that Pluto intensity, right? So it's a very rebellious type of energy. It desires radical, deep, real change, let's say. It arrives at it through a more somewhat cold analytical approach. Okay. Now, this is very much embedded in these Gen X people. Now, as I was Now, as we kind of move on to Elon Musk, remember the Pluto and Aquarius video, I said Gen X will rule. Okay. So we immediately have the situation where even though Donald Trump comes in, the boomer, he's sort of like handing off the torch, and nobody saw this coming to not even Elon Musk, I believe, to Musk. He's handing the torch off to Elon Musk, who I had to, look up his birthday to be sure. He's definite Gen X in 1971. This is his birthday. He's something like 53 years old. And it's just like, right, my straight out of my literal words, Gen X will rule. Here he is practically ruling, and that's where a lot of the controversy comes from. I don't believe that's literally the case, but at least that's sort of the reaction that people have to what he's doing through Doge and what Trump is allowing him to do. It's also this relationship between like the sun and Mars. It's sort of like the king and then the warrior who kind of gets the job done, and that's kind of the Trump Elon Musk relationship. But so here we have this Gen X person with this transformative, highly technical energy. As we know, has his own electric car company, Tesla, and SpaceX rockets, and his plans, very highly developed, elaborate plans to go to Mars, which requires literal rocket science. Okay, he has those definite traits of intense genius that are the hallmarks of Generation X. He is like the poster child for that. And he's coming in to play, and he's making these radical transformations. I don't even think that, like I said, that he saw this coming, because we'll get into his personality a little bit later. But generationally, he really fits the bill. He seems to be the one who's being called forth to lead the way right now. Resonating with the Pluto and Aquarius transit, right? Calling forth these Gen X people who have been kind of waiting in the wings to take over power from the baby boomers, right? Who have more of a Pluto and Leo energy. Okay, that's more flamboyant, which is definitely Trump. Okay, it's ruled by the sun. Remember, I said the sun-Mars relationship. So that plays out. What else can I say about Generation X before I move on? I would just add emblematically what's important about the mid-1960s. In 1964, we landed on the moon right as that Pluto-Uranus was getting so close. We actually had this most monumentous technological feat accomplished by actually sending human beings to the moon, right? In that period, that's an example which is used in Rick Tarnas's book Cosmos and Psyche about this astounding technological achievement, right? So here you have people who actually have that conjunction Pluto-Uranus in their birth chart. Okay. Now this image that I have on the screen of the god Mars with two lions is not really emblematic of Pluto-Uranus, but I'm going to get to that, why we're going to discuss that archetype. I do have the Mars Leo symbols at the top here of the picture. But I had to say a little bit of something about Generation X and how Elon Musk is the representative of that, proving out my prediction that Gen X will rule. It's already happening. Okay. So moving back to the chart of the election briefly of November 6, 2024. Okay. I, at the time, was too caught up in life and didn't even really bother to look at the Trump or Kamala Harris's birth charts. And while the other astrologers were getting all wrapped up in that and making their predictions, I just booted up the chart of election day to see what was happening. Um, and the only exact aspect on that day was between the moon and Mars. I have it blown up at the bottom of the screen here. If you can see the moon in Leo, 0 degrees, and Mars. I'm sorry, the moon in Capricorn, 0 degrees, and Mars in Leo, 0 degrees. Both 0 degrees in a 150. Let's see. In the quincunx angle, it's called quincunx. 120 degrees. Anyway, but this angle, it's not opposite. It's not an opposition. It's one sign short of an opposition. It's a very kind of awkward angle, but it's what I interpret as radical adjustment. Okay, so we have the moon, which rules the mood of the nation, for example, the public consciousness, in Capricorn, which is the government. So that was very apropos for election day. But it was in this angle of radical adjustment to what planet? Mars. Wow. This is the only aspect in this chart that was exact or close to exact on the whole day. The need for the public consciousness to make a radical adjustment to the masculine principle, to the Mars principle. Okay. And I could go on and on about this, but this seems to be shown in the, of course, Trump had basically a landslide victory. By the way, Trump also has a Mars and Leo rising, so it's almost like a no-brainer that he would win if you just look at this chart. Mars was just entering Leo. But that angle, some people call it adjustment. I call it radical adjustment, right? And it's like a lever. And with a lever, you can move the world, right? You can take that as far as you like to, because, considering the United States is the leader of the free world. So with a lever, you can move the world. It's a very powerful aspect involving this male masculine principle. And I think it played out in the demographics of the voting that so many males stepped up to vote and voted overwhelmingly for Trump. For example, even recently in Gavin Newsom's podcast, he was discussing with his guests this issue, and he said that we didn't lose white male votes. We lost male votes across all the different ethnic groups. Interesting, right? Especially with the Latin community. And then you have this sense of that bringing the masculine back in, redeeming it, bring it back into the culture. After a recent downtrodden period, let's say. And I think of just like Mars representing the drive for survival, and has that relates to the economy and the traditional role of the male to provide for his family, right? And he's focusing on the state of the economy. He wants to put that in the right hands going forward, right? No matter what the ethnic background happens to be. So that's one way that plays out, and which is a key way that it plays out. There is the literal connection. Hold on. Oh, I just want to say that, like, you even have like Trump dancing to YMCA by the Village People. The reason they were playing that song is not only is it like a fun party dance song, but it's just simply because it starts out with the line "young men, young men," which is literally the Mars archetype. The sun is more like the father, Mars is more like the young man. So that was so much in the zeitgeist as triggering the election, right? And it's just here in this chart, literally in black and white. Um, Now we get to Elon Musk in this, looking at this election chart, because what's Elon Musk all about? He's all about going, literally going to Mars, right? He owns a car company and he builds rockets. Now, Mars archetypally is connected to anything that moves you forward, that expedites you, moves you forward through time and space, right? So therefore, it's connected to engines and cars and rockets and all these kind of things, right? He has that in spades. It's just it's extremely on the nose, right? Now, at the time of the election, we saw his involvement, which did help. It was a major boost to Trump, as far as his big financial donation as well. But also, I want to say there were other Mars-like figures that were key. Joe Rogan, who literally hosts martial arts events and began his career in martial arts. Mars martial arts. Okay. These entrepreneurial types, even a comedian is entrepreneurial. That guy stands alone on a stage, right? Very Mars like. You had Trump at like MMA, fighting matches, very Mars, right? Um, but you can see how Elon Musk is playing into this very much as well. So moving on, this video I hope not to be too long. I'm going to look just briefly at Elon Musk's chart because I hadn't gotten around to looking at it. But I just knew, I was like, where is his Mars? What is going on with he's got to have a prominent Mars, right? And I'm going to look at this briefly and wrap this up. Now, this is a accurate chart because it's taken from his biography. And lo and behold, and there's a lot of clutter on this chart here, but if you look to the kind of the upper right of the screen, you'll see Mars in Aquarius. I'm going to blow it up a little bit more for you. Mars in Aquarius near the North Node in the 8th house. Now, there's that Aquarian connection that I was talking about earlier, the Uranus Aquarius thing. It puts his personal drive, Mars, in the area of technology and futuristic concerns, right? Uranus, Aquarius is always about the future, where tomorrow is way more important than today, right? So, but it's also the sign of genius, right? Especially a technological genius, and in that drive and passion to work in that realm. We definitely see that in his personality. It's in the highly transformative 8th house near the North Node, which really activates his destiny, right? Close to like Saturn here. Saturn is more to the left, but also upper in the chart. This is what we call the most elevated planet. So it's called, both Mars and Saturn are the most elevated planets. So they're emphasized in that way. Mars is also like a singleton. It's sort of hanging out by itself over here, where you see the little green Aquarius symbols. Okay. So of course he has a prominent Mars. He also has Mercury rising in the 1st house, which is the mind, which is definitely the 1st house is the most like kind of immediate zone of one's personality. It's what other people get. And he has the planet of the mind. So again, another indication of genius. And what about that Pluto Uranus in Virgo stuff that from the Generation X, right? Where are they? Well, down here near the bottom of the chart, we have both of those planets in the 3rd house. Now, house 1, 2, 3 in astrology are just the basic foundation of the personality, the self, the, then the talents and abilities and resources of the second house, and then just the mind. We call the third house the mind. So he has this powerful Pluto Uranus conjunction that's so radical and so intense and revolutionary, totally accessible through his mind. It's laid out in the third house of the mind, of his intellect. Talk about that. You got that planet of revolutionary genius, Uranus, ruler of Aquarius, right in the third house of the mind. Okay, with also the deep drive to make real changes and real transformative changes. The intensity of Pluto right next door to it. So he's definitely a representative of his generation. He has a kind of slow, intense, very deliberate and lucid way of speaking and communicating, right? Because he has such big ideas that he has to put across very carefully, very precisely, right? That third house there. He also has a Virgo moon to add to that analytical strength, that innate analytical ability. He's a hard worker. There's the stories about him just sleeping in the office at Tesla on the floor, things like that, with, you know, 19-hour days or something like that. And the last thing that I'll just point to is there are connections with this chart and the United States natal chart. Of course, the United States is a Cancer nation because its birthday is July the 4th. That's Cancer. He is a Cancer rising with Mercury in Cancer rising. He's a Cancer sun and a Cancer rising. He's a double Cancer. In fact, his ascendant, let's see, yeah, his ascendant is very pretty much conjunct the United States natal sun. Wow, he has a big role to play in this country. Now, the moon in the United States chart is in Aquarius, where his Mars is. So that's all I'm going to get into with this today. I hope you learned a lot about the astrological spiritual energy that was at play during the election and how it's unfolding, how it involves bringing Gen X to the fore through people like Elon Musk in particular, how the that Mars energy really defined the election, and through someone like Elon Musk, the administration going forward, or a lot of the work. And there's another things like the idea of like cutting precision. Like they say, you should use a scalpel, right, to cut out all the fraud and abuse and things like that Doge is finding, right? Well, Mars rules those things too. Rules sharp objects, knives and surgeons and surgery, right? And that's something that he's doing. It's funny because he comes out with it's just a theatrical move that he did, but when he came out on stage with the chainsaw, really making a big deal out of that. So another synchronicity there. You can even picture just Mars as just this warrior with a spear, right? He's out to do battle, but he has this sort of softer, more sensitive personality, the way that he comes across, right? He doesn't come off as an abrasive person. He's kind of almost socially awkward. But I get that from his Cancer rising for sure, which is a feminine, sensitive water sign, right? Now, I'm going to leave it at that, and leave a comment, thumbs up, like and subscribe and share if you found this interesting. Let me know if you would like me to go more in depth into the charts of some of our leaders. I was thinking about starting a membership, like a monthly membership for a few bucks, and I would post special videos where I go way more in depth into these various charts. Thought that would be one way to do it, because on a video like this, I don't want to get so in depth into someone's psyche like this that astrology kind of allows us to do. But anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more.